Welcome to the Creative Industry Insight podcast, a podcast that looks at various roles in the creative world. I'm your host, Bobby. Today's guest, cinematographer James Kniest, joins us to talk about his work on the Haunting of Bly Manor. Please be warned, there are heavy spoilers in this episode, so make yourself comfortable as we jump into the conversation with James. Thank you for joining me today, Jimmy. I understand you're in quarantine, so pretty much you couldn't say no.
Hi, I'm in quarantine. Thanks for having me. Sorry about the time difference with you. I know it's getting a little late there.
I know. I enjoy it. I prefer to record later in the evening because I've got something to look forward to in my day, and also you have the whole day to sort of mentally prepare yourself to talk to your guests. And I'm kind of excited to sit down and talk and sort of hopefully have some good questions for you, so we can spin some liquid gold for our listeners. Obviously, people would know when they see the title of the show that Jimmy is the DOP for The Haunting of Bly Manor. Before we start, I probably should warn people that there's going to be spoilers, and either watch it beforehand or we can hear how it's all made. So you have been warned. So Bly Manor is about, after an au pair's tragic death, Henry hires a young American nanny to care for his orphan niece and nephew who reside at Bly Manor with Chef Owen, groundskeeper Jamie, and housekeeper Mrs. Groves. So my understanding, Jimmy, is that you joined midway through filming and you DOP'd episodes 6 through 9. How did the job come about, and what was it like joining so late on to the process, and how did that affect your prep?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I have kind of a relationship with Trevor Macy, who is one of the principals at Intrepid Films, who was part of the creative and producing team of Hill House, Haunting of Hill House, and The Haunting of Bly Manor. I had done a movie. Well, I did a movie with Mike Flanagan a couple years back called Hush, and Trevor was the producer on that as well. It's kind of a long story, but I helped a director, Stacy Title, shoot a little teaser for a movie that ended up being called The Bye-Bye Man. It was at Weinberg's office at the time, and he was dragging his feet. He didn't want Stacy to direct it. So he stalled a little bit and said, here's a budget, go shoot a teaser, like a proof of concept for this movie called The Bye-Bye Man. So I did it. I rekindled my relationship with Stacy. I had gaffed a movie for her years prior, called Let the Devil Wear Black. And so we kind of connected again, and Trevor was a producer on that. And shortly thereafter, he asked me to meet Mike Flanagan and do the movie Hush in the Woods and in Alabama, which was a Netflix success and did really well. It's a great little movie. So I kind of had a relationship with Mike and Trevor, and I was talking to Trevor about another project, kind of reconnected a little bit. And then 2 days later, he called me back and he said, hey, funny about reconnecting. Are you potentially available to get on a plane on Friday and come to Vancouver and take over a show? And I did. So I had really no prep whatsoever. They wanted me to take over right away, but I said, let's let the other DP was going off to do something else. And it was kind of I think a little bit of an unforeseen decision or a last minute decision. So I suggested that he finish that episode. They wanted me to start right away, and then I could prep with the incoming directors, which is what we did. And I had like a week of prep before we started the first episode I shot. And so there wasn't really the normal process, but what it was for me was just kind of getting a lay of the land. I got to walk through the sets. I got to meet like the crew, the camera operators, the key grip, gaffer, camera assistants, kind of watch. I spent some time on set the first few days, just kind of watching how they worked and what the dynamics were, just get a kind of lay of the land and try to figure out how do I fit in, and everybody does things their own way. So, I'm on set looking like, okay, this is how this is rigged. This is how this is set up, and sometimes I'd be like, that's genius. Or at other times I'd be like, oh, I would never do that. So it's a very subjective business we work in, right? There's 101 ways to skin a cat. And so I was just trying to figure out the lay of the land, and then there was some mandates to make some stylistic changes and So I was just initially trying to figure out what my approach would be and how to change some things without rocking the boat too much, without like, okay, tear it all out, we're going to re-rig everything. Just sort of embracing what was there, tweaking it a little bit. For me, lighting wise is kind of like my first approach. And so it was seeing how all the sets were rigged and everything like that. A lot of times it just turn all that stuff off and we would just bring in something else, or we could repurpose something a certain way. Or oftentimes I embraced what they were already doing and just tried to maybe finesse it a little bit more. It's interesting in our business when you come in and you see something from a little bit farther away, you have a way different perspective and picture than when you're right in the middle of it. So for me to go and hang out the first couple of days on set and see things from a little bit of a distance, I think was the most advantageous prep that I could do to give me a sense of the lay of the land and how things were working and what was working and what wasn't working. And so that gave me a lot of, ammo to go into the next few episodes.
How do you decide what's working and what's not working? Is this something that I guess the producers sort of say to you that they haven't liked certain things, or do you just look back at what's already been shot and sort of look at it and deconstruct it all?
Yeah, I think kind of all those things, right? Like I got feedback, or I try to get feedback from every person, like from the producers if they're happy with the final product, all the way down to like the grips and electric, how is the rigs working, how is the setups working, to the AD, or how are the efficiencies working? Are we making our days? Is there like something that we have to do constantly that eats up a lot of time? Is there a way to approach it a different way? Like, hey, every time we look at that window, we have to bring the translate around. And, so either we schedule things a little bit differently so that we're not waiting for that stuff to happen, or like, hey, maybe we could talk to visual effects, and instead of bringing that translate around, could we get a plate of that translate and rig a green screen there that just stays, and just things like that. So I would just check in with all the different departments and get their honest take on it, and it was actually a good way for me to kind of build a rapport with them and a relationship with them, and give them a way to advance. They'd already been working on this show a lot, and they had some struggles and difficulties, and there was a little bit of tension and maybe fatigue, and when I came in, and so it was also a good opportunity for people to kind of vent and get some things off their chest, and then for me to help them make their jobs a little bit easier by making some slight adjustments, whatever they may or may not have been. Like, so it was kind of, for me, that was one of the biggest advantages, was just starting to build a working relationship with all these different departments and hearing their gripes, hearing their positive things as well, which I think are just as important. I mean, what we do is interesting and hard and stuff, but we should all enjoy it. If people aren't enjoying their work, I think they're not as productive or maybe as creative. And so I think it's important to always kind of set an atmosphere that's enjoyable, and if that's solving people's problems, or at least hearing their problems, that goes a long way. I think that's one of the most important things in establishing a productive work environment. So this was a good opportunity to start, kick the ball off with just meeting everybody and asking them how things are going.
And it's great, you get sort of feel of the land, and I guess it also sort of makes you look really sort of considerate, because you come in, see what's what, and then instead of sort of coming in destroying what's been built, just sort of slotting in and just improving on it, really.
Yeah, it's kind of unfair because I didn't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. It's like going in when all the ingredients are already prepped and then cooking some food. I didn't have to go to the garden and pick it and clean it and all that stuff as it were.
You just sprinkle the sugar on top. It's like, we're done.
Yeah.
Perfection.
It was a little bit more than that, I'll have to say.
What I noticed as well when looking at the different episodes is that you work with multiple directors over the 4 episodes. How does that affect? Because I understand like the look and vision of the show probably doesn't change with each director, but how do you work with having a different director, because each person works in their own way?
Yeah, well, I think that's some of the funnest part, right? Is the collaborative process, and then working with different artists in all respects is really fun and gratifying in our business and on this particular project, mostly in episodics. There's alternating DPs, and the DP will prep with the incoming directors as the other DP is shooting those scenes or shooting those episodes. For some reason on Bly, initially it was set up with just one DP, Maxime Alexander, who was the first DP. And so when I came in, a lot of the incoming directors, or all of them, were like, when do we get to prep? And I'm like, well, normally we would have a prep, but in this case, I ended up just giving my weekends, and we would prep on the weekend, and I would actually have them come to some of the sets that we were shooting on, that we would be shooting on in the next episode, and walking through stuff with them at lunch, staying after, and going through some things. So that was a little bit different for me. I felt like it shortchanged the directors a little bit, and I know at first they were all kind of apprehensive about not getting real prep time in. But I think when everything was said and done, I really did everything I could to give them as most time as possible. And I think they all felt pretty good by the time we started shooting. And it's kind of a cool thing too about when you're working on location or out of your home city. It's like, I'm here to work, and the material and the show and the people involved were also great, that it's really easy to be motivated to give everything you can to help get it produced, get it shot, get it finished. And so it was very motivating for me and we had some really cool locations. So like going and walking on the weekends out in this Canadian farmland, or we had amazing sets built on stage that were huge, and they were pretty awe-inspiring. And so it's kind of fun too, it's what we do. So it's different if I'm at home and, my family and my kids are like, hey, you have 2 cars to wash today, and like, or whatever it is. And instead of going and working with the directors on the weekend. So that was something that's kind of out of the ordinary. But I quite enjoyed working with the different directors. We had several. We had a team. Ben and Yolanda from Australia were the first directors I worked with. And they're super creative, very easygoing, really smart people. And they work together well to sort of, bounce ideas off of one another, to kind of vet things before we would talk about it. So it was kind of a neat, different dynamic that I think helps truncate the process a little bit, because they had some checks and balances. They had some sounding boards that would sort of filter before we discuss things, or if we were doing something in a group creatively collaborating, there was just more ideas to bounce around. So it helped, I think, in shaping some of the approaches and some of like the shot listing and developing shots. And they were very generous and very open to my ideas. And I think I was with theirs. It was just a really great chemistry that we had between us. And then the next director was Axel. She's comes from a genre, if you will, which is kind of a funny term now because it's so broad background, and she had a lot of really good ideas. And again, I think that we just kind of hit it off. I was able to meet with her over the holidays in LA and kind of start talking about things, knowing that we wouldn't have a lot of prep time together. So we used that time, I think, wisely in LA. We had lunch and we would talk about things and send emails back and forth. And so I didn't feel like we started from scratch when she showed up in Vancouver just for her episode. And again, she's just a really good communicator. And I thought we had quickly developed a really good language back and forth. And we were able to hash out a lot of stuff pretty quickly. And her episode was the standalone episode 8, which was the flashback black and white period one. So it kind of had its advantage in that it was a standalone, and there wasn't a whole lot of continuity to adhere to or track from previous episodes per se. The sets in the manor and the grounds got redressed. So it was like a little mini movie, really. And, I've done some indie stuff where you don't get much prep time anyway. It's like, you get a week and it's full immersion. And that's kind of what this was like with Axel for episode 8, was we just kind of dove in, fully immersed ourselves early, and then stayed in touch. And then she came early too, and she would come on set and we would spend time talking about the upcoming episode. And then I would even flip the camera. We shot in black and white. I would even flip the camera knowing that we had upcoming scenes in these same locations, even though they were redressed for a period. I would go to black and white and I would take a look at it and see how they held up with like paint colors and wardrobe colors and things like that in black and white. And and some of the lighting approaches, knowing that it was pre-electric lights. So, you know, hey, you guys go to lunch, but turn off all the lights and leave the camera on. And I would sit and noodle a little bit with Axel, and I'd say, like, this is what it's going to look like in black and white. And so I think we just found every chance that we had to work on the show and to get up to speed and flesh out our ideas. And it worked out pretty well in the long run.
I'm glad that you mentioned episode 8 because it was shot in black and white. It looks really cool. It's such a change of pace because you have previous episodes where it's all in color and you get to see everything looks quite glorious in previous episodes because you have this big manor house, all these paintings, all the sort of set decorating and production design. But then to go black and white into the sort of flashback is pretty ballsy because I think you miss all those colors of that sort of period. So was that a decision that was made very early on, or was that something that was sort of toyed with?
No, it was a decision that was made early on before I got involved. In fact, it was when I was told about the project and started to learn more about it, and that was already on the plan. I was really excited about it. You know, I kind of come from a traditional portraiture background and traditional photography, like came up shooting film and processing my own film and learning all about film chemistry, you know, and so a lot of black and white in that and color. But so that's where my roots lie. And so, of course, I get really excited about any black and white. I'm a huge fan of, you know, old Hollywood black and whites, George Horrell's and some of the old glamour stuff. I even love all the noir films and photography. So, and I've done some other things in black and white. So I got really excited about it. And one thing, and I probably get in trouble for saying this, but so I'm not sure how familiar you are with how our digital cameras work nowadays with LUTs, which are lookup tables, which kind of you can dial in your look as you're shooting, but it doesn't necessarily record that way. It records still in RAW, and you just apply this look to your footage. So, you know, as DPs and camera assistants and even directors, we're always playing with our LUTs. You know, I equate it to film stock from back in the days where each one would have their own kind of characters in terms of like the tonal curves and the contrast and the color saturation and stuff like that. So in finding a look for that is I also would compare the LUT in the black and white to a color as well, just to make, and I was cognizant when I was lighting to make sure all the color temperatures worked, you know, so there wasn't like an orange light and a blue light and all that that you wouldn't see in black and white. But I was careful to make sure that it all would work in color, just the remote chance. I've kind of learned enough to know to cover your ass a little bit. And so I was a little cognizant of making sure, God, if Netflix or wherever there was going to be a director's cut that they would want to go to color, I just want to make sure that I don't get a phone call someday saying, hey, how come we can't, but it was never really on the table that we would do it. It would be released in color, and so it was all pretty much black and white. And I think it turned out really well. I struggled a little bit with our finishing process because it wasn't normal. I had to finish remotely in the color grade, and I only was able to view it on an iPad Pro, which has nowhere near the fidelity as these normally $30,000 monitors in a color suite when you'd be tweaking every little thing. So it's really hard to tell. And then we also finished in HDR, and nobody's really monitoring HDR on set right now because it's just cost prohibitive. So there's little things that you don't see while you're shooting that end up being slightly different in HDR, and then not being able to see it in a traditional grading bay made it even a little bit harder. But I still think that the episode 8 came out really, really good in black and white. But one of the things that I find interesting is because of the period, our costume designer, she made amazing dresses, Lynn, and a lot of the fan base I found, because I made the mistake of following all the fan base stuff and reading the comments and stuff, is they were all pining to know what these dresses really looked like in real life, and rightfully so, because they were just absolutely stunningly beautiful, and their different subtleties of shades and the way the light played on the silk. And I thought that was one thing that was a little bit lost in the black and white. I think they translate it really, really well nonetheless. But everything else, I think, fell into place really good with all the set deck and all the props and the production design and the lighting design and all that stuff. I think fell together. And surprisingly, what translated really well for me was some of the water stuff and some of the exterior lake stuff. It's funny, near the end of the episode, we start to kind of come back in time. And so we're slowly introducing color back into the episode. It starts like around the plague era. And you start to see some like slight sepias and a little bit of warmth in the skin tones. And then by the last scene of the episode, we're back to color. So it's kind of fun. You can kind of watch that transition, and it's I think it kind of goes slightly unnoticed as you're watching it, but the material is pretty dramatic at that point. So I can see why.
When I was watching it as well, is it my understanding that you did do some shots just lit by candlelight?
Yeah, we did. We had quite a few lit predominantly by candlelight, and some only lit by candlelight. There's a scene that I quite like. It's really, really intimate, and it really shows the chemistry between the two sisters, not only as characters, but also I think the actors have a really cool chemistry that I got to watch and be part of and watch them have fun on set, and they're really connected. And they're in bed alone with a single candle, and they have a really intimate moment where they end up coming and touching foreheads together as they're kind of planning the future of the manor and their estate, because their father had passed away. And that was lit solely with one candle. Then there's a couple other scenes where people are walking through the house with a candle, and there's some little bit of lighting deep in the background, but all the stuff on their face is all single candle. It's kind of a testament to how sensitive our cameras are these days, and the sensors. And then, there's different candles too. Like there's single wick candles, double wick candles, even triple wick candles that they burn pretty brightly. You'd be surprised. Like a triple wick candle is bright. But the flame is also really big too. So the hard part about that is that things near there will get really bright and blow out, including the flame itself. But then, it falls off really quickly. So you kind of have to decide where you want to, prioritize your exposure in terms of like, is it someone's face right here to be kind of dark in a dark lit thing, and then everything goes really black? Or you want to let that flame kind of be bright? And that's kind of the fun in the moment decisions that are rewarding when it all works out right.
Yeah, because it looks incredible, and it's amazing to think that when somebody like Kubrick shot an entire film by candlelight, they had to have specialist lenses made by NASA just to sort of capture everything. But I guess the look
Well,
that
he was using film that was, I think, it was definitely no more sensitive than 100 ASA. And our cameras out of the box now pretty much start at 800. Some are even up to 5,000 ASA now. So, and they also didn't have the advantage, like they shot film and they wouldn't know what it looked like till the next day. I mean, of course they have some really good understandings. But nowadays you see what you shot. Like, there's no, even with focus and stuff like that, like the guys I came up with, the focus pullers, they don't know if their shot's sharp until the next day at dailies when they're where they're going to get fired because the 200 mil of the actor running up is not sharp. These guys were amazing. Now the technology has changed the job so much. I don't know how these ACs do it, because they have their head, they're watching the monitor and they're turning the focus as it's all happening, and not so much by space and distance in space, but just by what they see. And I've really found it, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. I have a lot of close friends that are focus pullers for years that, they're in their 50s now. And so they were trained the traditional way and were exceptional at their jobs, and they've adjusted to the new way and are still exceptional at their jobs. And it's I think one of the hardest jobs on set now because of the resolution of the lenses, the resolution of our cameras. Before with film and older lenses, things were kind of blurry anyways, right? Now it's so sharp. You can tell if someone's nose is sharp and their eyelashes aren't. It's like, it's hard. I don't know. And people have 8K TVs in their living room now. It's a tough job, man. And, we don't rehearse like we used to. They don't get the time to get the measurements like they used to. And these guys are just nailing it. Like I'm ultimately impressed by the focus pullers these days.
So I've pulled focused on we were at school shooting on 16 mil, and pulling focus on that and then not seeing anything till the next week. Wow, daunting. And then when people watch it, be like, wow, it actually looks really good. You're just like, whoa.
What were you What cameras were you using?
We were using an Arri,
Oh, like an Area 3 or something,
something
or
like that. Yeah, and it was cool. Like, I even loaded the film as well in a dark room, and that was daunting because one little slip up and that's it. Your all your film's gone,
right.
and it's just amazing now. It's just all on a card.
That scares me more because like people wipe cards. I'm like, oh wait, you sure you downloaded the film? It's just ones and zeros, you know? It's like freaks me out. I'm always worried, you know, like, or like sometimes people are like, oh, get the big card. I'm like, oh, I don't want all of our footage on one card. No, 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 no. And I'm always like, you know, we have way different workflow now, but when it first came out, you know, we were like, you'd have one card with your whole day's worth of shooting on it. And now like we have workflow where we're always shooting cards. We never want that to happen. Like we learned the hard way. But yeah, it's the digital is daunting to me. Is the image is really there?
It must be an absolute heart attack when you get a card error or something.
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, for a while early on, we were recording to two devices at the same time, or dual cards, or we would get like a off-board recorder, and just you know, it was all redundancy and backup because we were just learning about it now. Now the systems are so robust, and I tend not to stress it too much, but it happens on occasion, you know. But if we're doing something that is precious like that, we all get new cards, we test, do a test roll. You know, there's a protocol that keeps us from getting fired.
Before you mentioned that there wasn't as much rehearsals as before, but in Bly Manor, there's a lot of camera movement. And what I'm curious to know about is how do you make sure that the camera sort of flows nicely, that it doesn't interrupt the concentration of the actor, but making sure that you capture like those important moments.
Well, that's funny because when I came to Bly, they weren't moving the camera much, and they were doing a lot of like very symmetrical, static shots. And my propensity is to move the camera all the time. You know, I really like the way that it helps editorially, kind of poetically stitch scenes together. I think our audiences are so sophisticated now that they need to feel that flow. There needs to be some visual progression happening all the time, until you don't want it to, right? Until you want to stop it all for a reason to get your audience to let something sink in or have a moment play out. But so that was one of the things I remember distinctly is like, you know, I think the very first day I'm like, okay, we're gonna do steady cam, and everyone's just like, we don't do that on this show. And I think that was the only, or maybe the first kind of hiccup I had or roadblock. You know, I was like, well, we're gonna start moving the camera now, and so we ended up moving it quite a bit, and I think successfully too. And for an actor, I could never do what they do. They just constantly amaze me on their focus, and I think it's just part of the job for them is to be able to act with the camera and the camera people working there. We always try to minimize it as much as possible, especially for sensitive scenes, whether they're emotional or they're intimate. But it's part of the thing, you know, the camera is part of the dance. And it's really fun when you get to work with actors that get that and they're able to block the camera out, but they're also really good at working with it and moving to it and finding their angles and finding the lights. I think a lot of it's innate for some of them. It could be practiced over time, but there's those little moments of magic, and I'm at the monitor and I watch it, and the actress turns right at the right time, and the light comes, and the lens focuses right on them, and that's like that. Those are those moments that keep you excited and keep you trying to craft and repeating, you know. And so, you know, a lot of it's discussed with the actors. I learned that a long time ago. We would come in, we'd block a bunch of stuff, and then an actor would come in and be like, "Oh, I would never go to the window in this scene." And it's like, well, we just laid dolly track and we lit it all. And like, he's like, yeah, but my character would sit in the chair over here. So I kind of learned early on that let's talk to the actors and get their sense of what's going to happen in the scene before we go off and start designing and implementing some plan that they're not even on board with. So I think it's important to include them in what you're doing, unless you have unless you have a really specific reason that you're trying to do, whether it's a transition piece to the next scene, or you're setting something up for a close up, or a lot of times it happens too is we have a stunt and there's rigging there that something has to happen in a certain place, or we'd have to go re-rig it all. So unless there's a reason to fight for it, then I like to get the actors' input onto how they would move through the space and then work with them to help choreograph something that helps the story or helps their character or keeps the pace up, or sometimes just shows a new area of the set. Like a lot of times in episodic stuff, like we're shooting the same sets a lot, and you start to get stale sometimes. You start to want to look for new angles and looking through stuff and just trying to give some variety. I think A, for your own sanity, and B, I think for the viewers, and also to, like, the production designers and the set decks and the prop people. They work really, really hard, and it's really fun to show off their work, and to include it in the story and show those little storytelling tidbits maybe that you didn't notice or we never really focused on, like, I don't know, a trophy or something in the corner, and that's that's always fun. So it's, I think, important to get everybody involved with kind of designing the shots and the way the camera moves, and it's a fun language to use with, and I'm learning more and more still all the time about what the camera movement is saying and what message it's conveying in terms of tone and tension and all that. And it's really fun to keep doing it and learning more and trying new things and learning from other people, from like Steadicam operators or a crane guys, like, oh, we could swing this way. And, that collaboration is really, really fun. And now with the tools that we have, almost anything is possible. It's crazy. They started making movies where they had to put a camera in a big room and roll the room around because of the noise. And now we have stabilized heads on techno cranes and cameras on wires that fly around and remote control cars that have, it's incredible. Whatever you could dream up, you could do, and there's a lot of lo-fi things. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've embraced a lo-fi approach. It's like, oh yeah, just put me on the skateboard and push me down the hallway, and it's like, the viewer doesn't really know. It's like what happens on the screen. Like, you don't have to really know what's going on behind the curtain. And it doesn't always have to be like this $1 million tool. It doesn't have to be a 75-foot techno crane on a arm car or whatever it is. It could be something really simple. And, the idea is to come up with this shot and then just figure out all the different ways to do it. And that's something like the key grips are great with, the operators are great with, dolly grips are great with, like, I'm kind of learning now to try to work with really good experienced people, tell them how we think the camera wants to go, and then let them kind of come up with the problem solving. And, because I think it's good to keep everybody involved, and I think you get more out of people, and everybody has way more fun, and they want to come to work, and they want to put their mark on the film. And to me, that teamwork is, I don't get to play team sports anymore. Doing what I do, I'll never be on a softball team every Tuesday night, So that is our team sport, right? And that's the fun thing. So I'm not sure if I answered your question about it. I think that getting everybody involved with how the camera is going to move through the space and how it's going to help tell that story is a really important place to start. And I think it helps with efficiencies, and I think best idea wins. So I in no way have the best ideas. I have seeds I like to plant and then, like, help them grow. But, I think we have a lot of really smart people on our sets, and it's fun to see them bring stuff to the table.
No, you did answer my question. And as you said, you want to bring the actor into the conversation as well, of how you're going to move and where the camera is going to be. As you said it before as well, they're supposed to go to the window, and then they might chime in and be like, well, that's not what my character would do. And it's kind of great as well to hear, like, how open you are, like, collaborating and bringing people in, and to make sure that you get the best end result.
And a lot of us is to save time. Like, I think morale is a huge thing. And if you got to redo stuff, or like, it just kind of eats away at the day, eats away at the clock, eats away at people's morale. It's like, let's just talk about it and do it once instead of having to redo it. And so, yeah, without all the information, you really can't make the best decisions and best choices. So get all the information.
I'm curious to know as well, there's a scene shot where there's 2 Henry Thomases in the screen. I'm curious to know how that was done, because there's always, for me, I always look at to see if there's any stitching or sort of camera tricks in play. And I guess because one is quite low lit and the other one is well lit, I didn't actually really see anything. And I'm kind of curious to know how that was achieved on screen.
So it was all in camera for the most part, and it was all pretty lo-fi. You know, Dark Henry is what Uncle Henry's alter ego we called, and so we lit him darker. We kind of wanted to give him a different mood, and even sometimes the color of light on him would be different to just really help differentiate the two. They were both played by Henry Thomas, who's amazing, really generous, nice guy, amazing actor. And we did that in two ways. One was with a really lo-fi motion control system called the Moses. And there's a couple of motion control systems out there. Most of them are really big and you have to program them and they take a lot of time and they're really expensive and they come with like six, or not, that's not true. They come with two techs and all this stuff. So that really wasn't an option for us. So we use this thing called the Moses, and basically it's just a repeatable head on regular dolly track with a, not a cable, but a belt drive. And so the dolly track can get repeated in the same time, and the head can pan and tilt, but there's no arm going up and down or anything like that. So it's pretty two-dimensional in a way, at least on those axes, and so we use that. And then the other way we did it was just split screen with lock-offs. And Henry played both sides of the character. So there was a little bit of choreography with when they're walking through space and where they pass each other and all that kind of stuff. But all that was done in camera, basically. And that was really fun. It was slightly daunting at first, trying to design these shots, knowing the limitations of the piece of equipment we were using. But it turned out really well. And now I really like that piece of gear. And I have ideas for it all the time because it's pretty approachable financially and time-wise. It didn't take that long. And it worked out really, really well. And I quite like that stuff, in-camera photography, effects, and I'm always trying to figure out ways to do it real. I think it looks better, saves time, and I think producers like it too. Because there's not this open-ended thing, we'll do it in post deal, And I think it just becomes more believable when you can do it.
As I said, I do like looking to see where it might cut or sort of things are seamed together, because I know I was talking to an editor before as well when they did long takes of shots, but they wanted to add, they would have 3 different takes of the same shot, but then they would stitch it all together to make it seem like it's one long take. And I just like to sort of see how things are on screen, and that's the sort of magic as well of filmmaking and putting it all together on screen.
Well, that's why I say it's not what's happening behind the curtain. It's what actually happens on screen. And I've been involved in projects where, there's this kind of romantic idea of this oneer thing, of all these long oneers. And I've done quite a few of them and it worked out pretty well. But whenever we design them, I'm always looking for a place to bail out, to have a backup plan where maybe we go, across a wall, or we go across a beam or a pillar, so that we could always stitch it together there if we had to, so that it kind of takes the pressure off of having to do this one long take perfectly. It's like, look, we're just going to design it so we pass through this glass or can or whatever. So if it doesn't work, we're good. We'll just pick it up from there and one more take. And then it kind of takes the pressure off. And I think it helps. And then a lot of times we've never needed to make the cut, Steadicam guys and crane ops and operators love these challenges. They really, really do. And it's really fun. It's just sometimes it can be time consuming, and that's always, the clock's always ticking, especially in episodics.
Time equals money, I guess. And if you're a producer, you want to spend too much.
Well, and you only have so many days to shoot these things, and everything's scheduled pretty tight, and there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for going over, and we don't do overtime like we used to. We used to have 16-hour days all the time, and now they pretty much pull the plug at 12, if that. And now with COVID, people are trying to call it 10-hour days, which makes it really hard to come in, set up, shoot, and we're moving too. But, then it wrap in 10 hours. It's like, wow, people go home and we're just having lunch in the world.
I think the best example of that, I remember working on set somewhere and doing a coffee run and seeing normal people going to their normal jobs, and looking at my watch being like, I've been at work 3 hours already. I'm already like set up working hard. And then there's just people just like strolling up to their workplace.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting.
It's interesting to see as well the amount of hours that you do go on a set and like how many pages get done. Yeah, it's always a big difference in TV and film how many
Yeah.
pages you do, and it's always amazing to think like, oh, well, if we did this on a TV show, it would be 5 pages in a day easily. You do it on a
Ooh,
film, oh,
maybe one
yeah, it'd
or
be one, and you just
three.
think like, wow, is that it? Like, incredible. I think we did 13 pages in one day on a TV show, and
Yeah.
that was intense. But it was we managed it. I think there was quite easy setups, but oh,
It's
yeah,
a lot, a lot of the job now is management, I think, especially from a DP's standpoint, I came up with guys like, I'm not shooting till the light is right, and that just doesn't happen anymore. It's like, you have a call sheet to make, and your job hinges largely on making all that happen and making the days. And as a DP, you're kind of, top three with a target on your back if you're not making your days. And so a lot of the decisions, I think, are motivated. I wouldn't say they hinge completely on it, but they're motivated by efficiencies and time, and it's just a marriage of quality and quantity, really.
again, you said it's not about what's behind the curtain, but it is interesting to hear behind the curtain and the sort of pressure that people are under to get things done. I guess that leads me to my next question: were there any sort of happy accidents whilst filming, and what are the moments that you're most proud of on screen?
I mean, I could be snarky and say that every day is a happy accident. Yeah, there was some things that just worked out serendipitously, and it's one of the things that was interesting. I've actually told this story a few times, but so we shot in the winter in Vancouver, and they made a lake on the grounds of Bly, and for the actors to go in it at night, it had to be heated to certain degrees. I think it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and that inevitably, as winter progressed, caused steam, and it just became this big giant hot springs. And at first, I don't think they had to deal with it as much in the earlier part of the year, in the fall and in the summer. But by the time it was January and February, it was kind of an issue. So at first, it was a problem. I was like, I mean, dang, it's foggy, it's steamy, you can't see the actors in the water, and so I ended up asking for a bunch of fans, like big fans along one side of the lake. And so we would just blow the steam away. And sometimes aggressively, the actors would be against the wind. And we would cut the fans, and then they would say their lines, and we would have, I don't know, however much time depending on the dew point and the humidity and the temperature. But the thing that turned out to be a happy accident was it looked really cool, all the steam, if it was managed. And so started to add atmosphere all around the grounds of Bly, and it really helped blend the lake scenes in with the other grounds. And I think it just added a sense of mystery. And it also helped us hide some things that we were struggling with. So there was a grow op like a half a mile away that, of course, the lights are on at night, and it was this orange glow, and it kind of contaminated the environment. We couldn't really look that way. And so adding more atmosphere helped kind of obscure it. There was a couple of times we were fighting some lifts in the background. We could paint that stuff out, but it was nice we put ground fog down, and we'd have dry ice and things like that would just help the background fall off enough that we could hide stuff back there, and we didn't have as many problems. And so that was something I didn't expect, and something that I really like in the final edits are the atmosphere in the exteriors, the night exteriors at the Bly Manor. There was another scene when Jamie and Danny leave Bly and they go off to start their life in America. And we normally had not a whole lot of sun. And then on this day, we're exterior, and all of a sudden the sun just drops out of the clouds on the way to setting. And it was kind of set the tone for they have a bright future. They're going to America. It just had changed the whole feeling of the manor. But of course, we're racing in sunlight now. We've already shot the beginning of the scene, and now the sun's dropping, and we're doing a car mount, and we got it just in time. And there was one close-up I had a light after dark, but it all came together, and we never talked about ever shooting. In fact, I don't even think I saw the sun out on that set for 3 weeks prior to this happening. It never even occurred to me that this time in the schedule, the sun's going to all of a sudden be raking across but I thought it turned out pretty cool, and it was a really good timing in the story arc. as they were leaving Bly, it was sunny pastures ahead. And every time I watch it, I kind of just get that feeling. And I was like, well, God, glad we pulled that off. But it was a nail biter for sure. I remember frantically going, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And we just pulled it off. There's nothing worse than shooting half a scene in the sunlight and then the other half of the scene you turn around and the sun's gone behind a building or behind a cloud or makes you want to lose sleep.
No, but those sort of happy accidents, as you said, you added more layers to the scene. I don't know, I guess that's the sort of magic of filmmaking. Another sort of thing where you don't plan for it, it happens, and then you ace it sort of straight away. And because you don't have enough time, I guess you don't have that much room for error. So you're kind of, everybody's like laser focused. We're on this. We're going to get this done. We're going to make sure that it's all, excuse my language, shit hot.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I'll get pretty animated in that. It's funny, everyone calls it magic hour. I call it tragic hour. I came up as a lighting guy and as a gaffer and stuff. So I can tell you how many day exteriors I didn't do anything all day long until the end of the day. And it's like, get all the lights out, run! And you scramble and you have to light it all. And so I call it tragic hour, and it's kind of fun. I have fun with it. I enjoy getting all excited and running around and making sure it happens with multiple cameras. And I love shooting with multiple cameras. I think it's always fun trying to find different angles and all for the same scene. I think it helps editorially, like to have cross-cutting that matches perfectly. And that was something else I did on Bly that they weren't really doing, is they were doing a lot of single camera setups. And there was sometimes I had 3 cameras going.
3?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's kind of fun. And, it's lighting can be challenging in that respect, but I think it helps you get a lot of stuff done in episodic work. And then again, like I said, it helps editorially because everything cuts and matches. There's no continuity issues. We covered it all from, one setup. And yeah, it's fun to do that way.
So I'm going to just lead on from what you said about the 3 cameras. How much harder does it make it if you're lighting someone or doing a scene?
It makes it a lot harder, not only for lighting and for camera work, but like sound is really tough because like, oh yeah, one camera is shooting a super wide angle and then, the other camera is shooting this. And I really try not to do that to the sound department unless, like we're racing the sun and we have to do something like that, or at least I'll talk to them about it and ask them how much room they need before I start doing a close-up and a wide at the same time. I've learned a lot over the years how important sound is. And so I have a lot of respect for those guys now. And I can honestly say, and I'll probably get death threats, but I used to be like, oh, I only care about the pictures, but it's not how it really works. And it doesn't work well that way. And again, it's part of the collaborative process and we're all a team. And I just have learned how important sound is and how hard it is to get good, clean sound. So I've definitely changed my ways in that regard, but it's hard lighting wise because you light for a certain angle. So I'll try to always either shoot straight on and one side only, never 2 sides at the same time. I really want things to be complementary and for them to work. So it just takes a little extra brain power and a little bit of planning, and then sometimes too knowing that sometimes part of one camera shot doesn't work, it falls apart. So I've also learned that lesson to like make sure it's on the camera notes that we know that this shot does not work until this line or until the actor goes over there, because then you get all these emails now with the whole studio attached to it about like some problem. And it's like, no, we knew that it wasn't going to work until this. And, so you kind of just have to know that going into it. And it can be challenging for sure. It's fun to do it that way. And it's important, I think, for efficiencies. Again, like I said, a lot of our decisions are based on efficiencies now,
So this is one of my penultimate questions. In Bly Manor, it's the same with Haunting of Hill House. There's always ghosts sort of like hidden in the frame, which is always, I guess you have to be more than eagle-eyed to notice it. And I think there's a YouTube video where somebody spots 84 of them, which probably is only half or something, a ridiculous amount. What was your favorite ghost to hide in the frame?
Well, there's a little boy ghost that, because he's small, but he's also, their faces are eroding throughout the arc of the story, the ghosts and the history of Bly. And So their faces are kind of bright, you know, so you could just put a tiny kiss of light on this. They would wear these masks that had tracking marks, but they were later used to smooth their faces as if it's eroded. He was really small, so he was easy to hide in the little corners and stuff like that. And he was also very mischievous. And I think he probably took a couple of years of life off the ADs. And so I really liked when he was on set. So I could watch him not listen, and he would start picking at the grass, or some C-stands there. He starts playing with it. So I really liked his energy and his mischievousness. And he was just, he was a young kid. I think he must have been 6 or something. So I liked him. There were some pretty amazing costumes. Like the vicar has a pretty crazy costume. The plague doctor has a crazy costume. There's a soldier in there that has a kind of a crazy costume. Just in terms of their authenticity and like the plague doctor, he wore this mask and this, it's like waxed canvas suit, but he had to have a fan in there. And I mean, these guys that are playing these parts, they really had to work hard at it. And so seeing them all was kind of fun on set. And oftentimes they would wait around for us to get to that shot, and then we would have these discussions about where to put them. And so we try different places, and then we would have the age-old discussion of how much light to put on them. I would always kind of say, well, we can always make it darker. It's hard to make them brighter, but it was always a fine line, and it would be kind of fun because we'd be going at a pretty good pace, and then we'd get to these ghost elements, and they would kind of make us focus on how we're approaching it, and we would do a couple of variations, and then sometimes we wouldn't get to it, and we would have to come back to it and things like that. So yeah, I'd say The Little Boy was my favorite one. We had a stunt lady that played Lady of the Lake, and she worked really, really hard, and her costume was rough too. And she'd often be in like this nightgown outside at night in the wintertime barefoot. So I just had a lot of respect for how hard these people worked, and it probably goes, unsung to some degree. And I saw something where someone counted like 126 or something. I don't know. I was like, I don't know. That can't be right, because I don't remember doing all those. And the other part is we were talking about earlier about like how people view these streaming programs, and sometimes they're hard to see if you're not like, if you don't have a 60-inch TV and you're watching it on your iPad, and the contrast isn't really exactly how it was designed. And so I think a lot of people at first were like, I don't see any ghosts, and I think you have to take into account that they're not necessarily watching them in the best viewing environment on the best viewing apparatus. And so they're missing some of these little subtle details, and that's something that I'm constantly trying to learn more and more about, is how each streaming platform compresses the images and the logarithms they use. And each one's different, and how, your tonalities translate. That's like kind of new in terms of day-to-day stuff. Like we used to do it for the movie theater, and then however it ended up on, Hulu or Amazon is how it ended up. But now we're having to really take into consideration the environments and the platforms that our material is being viewed on. And it's a tricky thing. Like, what do we do? Do we gear it towards the optimum viewing environment, or do we gear it towards people who might be watching it on the bus in the daylight? So it's always in my head, like which way, how to do it. And I think we're still at the point where we're doing it for the optimal viewing environment, and then seeing how it translates. Like I've been watching Bly a lot, seeing how it translates and seeing how my different devices translate compared to, I have a really nice TV at home, but then I have an iPad that's older, mini, and then I look at it on my phone, and I look at my computer, and each one of them looks totally different, So it's really hard as an image maker to know how to design it now, like especially with, as we were talking earlier, theaters are closing, and we don't really know what the future holds in terms of media outlets and where things are going to be seen, and how to design our projects accordingly. Like, it's kind of a wild west right now, a little bit open, and I'd like to learn more. Is there anybody out there that knows more about this stuff? Please reach out to me, because I want to figure out some tests to do. And because from my knowledge, like every streaming platform has a different approach to it. And so that's sort of my charge at the moment, is figuring out how to tailor everything so it works best across the board. But ultimately something suffers,
That's cool. I can't believe that somebody thought there was 124 ghosts.
Something like
Um,
that. I saw it and like I had to just swipe past it because I was going to lose my mind.
but then again, if some of you saw ghosts from a certain day, you could always pinpoint being like, oh yeah, this was day whatever, and we were doing it this scene at this time, and we had chicken again for lunch. Um, there's always those little tidbits that you just remember about certain things, or even on sets as well, where certain things sort of happened. This leads me to my final question, Jimmy. What's next for you?
Right now, I am getting ready to start a new series with Mike Flanagan called The Midnight Club, and it's based on a book series. And it's I'm really, really excited about it. I can't really say too much. So I'm really excited. I'm working with Mike's great. He's a lot of fun. He's really smart. The producing team is very supportive, and the material's great. There's a lot of really cool layers to it, and then just the variety is really exciting as an image maker. I won't be on the same set every day. Like 10 years of Cheers, like that would just so like it's quite daunting, in fact, for all the different looks and all the different sets. And I'm hoping to use different lenses for different episodes or different stories, and have different color palettes and all these kind of things. And it's really fun working with the production designer already, talking about that stuff.
That's cool. It's cool to hear. And I'll once that's the release, I'd love to have you back on to talk about it.
I'd be
See it.
thrilled. Yeah.
Jimmy, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sitting down, talking with me. Caught you at a good time, so
Yeah.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you once
My
again.
pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Uh,
Anytime.
and The Haunting of Bly Manor is streaming on Netflix, so please check it out. Enjoy those episodes, especially episode 8. Episode 8 is really good. Really good. It's
Yeah.
really cool. Thank you again, Jimmy. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye. It was nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too. Take care. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.